Hi guys, it's Norman Sullivan from Higher Ground Lifestyle. One of the biggest decisions that you'll face when you're planning your camper van is deciding whether or not you want to put a pop-top roof in it. Now for me, that decision was made quite early on by my wife, who said, Norman, if it doesn't have a pop-top roof, it's not a camper van, it's just a van. So as we've been putting together the pop-top roof, we've been making this video over the last few months, and it's taken a wee while to make it because there are different stages of the pop-top installation, some of which was done before painting of the van and some of which could only be done really in the latter stages of finishing the van. So hopefully you find this video useful. Hopefully it inspires you to, if you want to put a pop-top in your van, decide that you can do it yourself, and hopefully you enjoy it.
Just so you're clear, we're not covering in this video your options in terms of pop tops, or indeed why we chose the pop top we went for. But what I will say is that the pop top that we chose was an unbranded pop top because it was very, very affordable. That meant it required a little bit more work, but I'm very happy with the final result. And the total cost of my pop top installation was £1,200. That included all of the fiberglass, the canvas already fitted, all of the hardware, all of the fixings, and everything I required to make a functional pop top. And I think that's pretty good value for money. Our unit was supplied by a company called Caledonia Campers just outside Edinburgh, but the same unit is available from multiple independent retailers under many different names.
The first thing you need to do is to remove the roof lining and all trim panels. This will also require you to disconnect the existing lights in the roof. I chose to keep these lights, and I subsequently lengthened the cable on one of them so that I could still have a courtesy light covering both the near side door and another one covering the rear door. The next thing you need to do is to locate the front roof brace. This is intended to brace the structure over the top of the driver and passenger seats, so it's obviously extremely important from a structural point of view. It's positioned in the middle of the seam above the front doors and hard up against the roof. It is a tight fit. I chose to secure this strut with bolts and panel adhesive. It is possible to tighten bolts behind the panel if you are careful, and I have to say that personally I am not a fan of the so-called tech screws that were supplied in my kit. When you're doing this, make sure the cable harness on the passenger side is above the brace before securing it. Also recognise that this will require removal of the handle above the passenger door, which it's only possible to refit if you choose to modify it. The next thing to do is to look at the dimensions for the hole on the roof. The diagram that I'm showing you here was done by me, and it shows the dimensions for the hole that was required for my pop top, as well as the long wheelbase version of my roof. Please check that this is also suitable for your pop top. I started off then by measuring the middle of the van from front to back to ensure that any hole that I cut was subsequently square to the van. But the most critical dimension is the location of the front of the hole. This needs to correspond with the rear of the bracing strut, and that's because the provided trim panel fits over here, but it must be tight against the bracket, as that's also where the tie-down fixings for the pop-top roof are located. I found this by carefully drilling small pilot holes from inside the cabin to mark the edge of the rear of this bracket. That also then identified where the front of the hole in the roof needed to be. I used these holes to mark that critical front edge dimension and then measured the rest of the hole from here, ensuring that it was square to the body using the centre line that I'd already marked up. I used a black marker pen for this, and I measured it many times before I eventually had the guts to begin cutting a very large hole in the roof of my van. Before I cut this hole, I used an ordinary saw to remove the adhesive between the roof strengthening bars and the flat steel roof sheet itself. This only took a few seconds, but is quite a messy job. I then cut the main roof aperture with a jigsaw and suitable steel blades, and used a grinder for the reinforced sections. This was actually one of the easier parts of the process, and it only took around 20 minutes in total. Be careful, the edges are sharp and the roof is considerably heavier and tougher than I had imagined it would be when I started. It's also important to finish off the hole with a file in order to remove any sharp edges or burrs before painting the raw edge for protection. As my van was being painted after I had installed the roof, I didn't choose to paint the edges at this time. It's also important that you are careful when you are cutting and drilling in the roof to protect the wiring harness that runs down the passenger side of the vehicle. It's very easy to catch this, especially when you start drilling holes to secure the canvas and trim pieces. The next job is to secure the strengthening bars that run across the rear of the vehicle and down each side. The images here show where these are attached, and again, I used bolts. I carefully measured the required holes and drilled these off the van to ensure that they were square and in the middle of the supplied box section. I also painted the box section after drilling with several coats of primer and white paint to provide corrosion protection. Untreated steel will rust very quickly, and although these reinforcing pieces will not be seen in use, they do obviously have a structural element, and I like to think that even the bits of the job that you can't see are as neat and tidy as the bits of the job that you can. At this point, we had an aperture in the roof that had been appropriately strengthened, and we were ready to fit the roof itself. To avoid damage before fitting the roof, I carefully packed the canvas away inside the fiberglass section and secured it with lightweight board. It would be very easy to damage the canvas when lifting the roof if you didn't do this. I wasn't too worried about scratching the paint on the roof of my van because it hadn't been painted yet, but I'd certainly advise protecting the paintwork if you don't intend painting your van after fitting. The roof is heavy, and we used 4 people to lift it onto the van. My roof came with the scissor hinges already attached to the roof. If yours doesn't, you will obviously want to fit these before you lift it onto the van. Once roughly in position, I located the bolts that fit into the existing threaded holes in the van roof to ensure that it was seated properly and safe. In order to locate the rest of the bolts, it's necessary to lift the front of the fiberglass pop-top roof so that the scissor hinges sit flush with the roof of the van. Be careful when you're doing this, as it would be easy to damage the hinges, the roof, the van, or indeed all 3. We used an adjustable ladder to stabilise the pop-top inside the van when we were doing this, and it worked extremely well. Just make sure that the hinges and roof remain square during the fitting process. Again, I opted to use bolts and nylock nuts to secure the tent to the roof rather than a combination of bolts and Tek screws. Once the scissor hinges have been secured, the next job is to attach the gas struts using the provided hardware. I fitted these to the brackets on the pop top and measured where they needed to be located on the roof at full extension and at the height I wanted the roof to rise to. I did think about setting the roof height with the struts not quite fully extended, but decided against this, as if the struts can't extend fully, then the canvas will be taking the strain and pushing against them constantly. I again chose to use bolts to secure the strut brackets to the roof. And an important point here is to remember to use rubber washers on any fixings going into your roof to prevent the ingress of water. These were all supplied in my kit. With the struts fitted, the roof becomes a little bit more stable, but it's still not completely stable until the canvas is fitted, as the canvas in use effectively acts like the guy ropes on a tent. On my roof, the canvas is secured to the roof of the van by plastic extrusions that pin it down on all four sides. I chose to secure these to the roof with bolts and locking washers into rev nuts that I located before the van was painted. I cut the extrusions to length and positioned them on the roof in the correct locations to spread the base of the pop-top canvas, but didn't secure the canvas itself until after painting. At the rear, the extrusion needs to accommodate the ribbed section that remains. I made this a much neater fit by applying heat to the extrusion and moulding it to the shape of the roof using the panel that I had just removed. This makes for a much nicer job.
Having spent a lot of time and effort making sure that the pop top is fitted just right, the last thing I want to do is to make a mess of it when we go to paint. So preparation for painting is really, really important. What you can see I've done already is to make sure that all of the canvas is completely protected. Eventually the guys in the paint shop will mask all that off because I want the pop top to be body coloured. The other thing I've done is I've made sure that all of the fittings are actually in place now. So I've dry fitted the canvas and I'm holding all of the fiberglass pieces and the canvas top in itself with nuts and bolts, which will be on retaining washers, and they're held into riv nuts that I've positioned all around the roof of the van. The reason for that is to make sure that all of the drilling and all of the cutting is done before it's got its shiny new coat of paint. Now it feels a little bit like you're doing this out of order or you're doing things twice, because essentially you're building the pop top and then you're packing it all away to rebuild it. But when I come to put it back together after paint, it should be a simple case of just popping the bolts in, tightening the canvas, job done, and without the worry of scratching that lovely new paint job.
On return from the paint shop, my first job was to unravel the canvas and secure it to the roof using the extensions and riv nuts prepared earlier. This involved making sure that the roof was square before carefully tensioning the canvas and tightening the bolts with split washers. A word of caution here. It's easy for the roof to sway left or right under its own weight if you are on any kind of slope before the canvas is secured, and for you to secure the canvas in a lopsided way as a result. I actually needed to use a rope to square up my pop top before undertaking this stage. So just be careful with that.
So the way that I found it best to fix the canvas is to find the middle point of the canvas and to ensure that the center of the canvas is located in the center hole and the center riv nut that we've put in place. Then to tension the canvas in the middle, put a single screw in and work out the way, taking the various different wrinkles that you'll see appearing out at the same time. My technique for putting in each of these different tensioning screws is a bit difficult to show you, but essentially what I'm doing is I'm pulling the canvas along, taking the wrinkles out of it, using one of these sharp kind of piercing tools to find the hole and pierce it through the canvas, then using just a slightly larger screwdriver to push through and make a slightly larger hole in the canvas, which allows me to put a screw in, which I'm then tightening with one of these neat little ratchet handles. And in doing that, we can work our way along, tensioning and tightening, tensioning and tightening. I've now finished pinning out the front and the back. I've left the outside screws just so I can do some final tensioning on there. And what I've also done is I've just started to put in each of the side retainers, and they're only held in with one screw at the moment, right in the middle, just so we can start to peg out the canvas. And the important thing here is to get the corners nice and neat. So you can see we've got a very neat pinch in the corner so that we can pin that down and tidy it up later.
Same thing now on the sides, just gently working our way out, stretching and tightening the canvas and pitching our roof tent. And I think that is the thing to remember. You're pitching a tent. That's exactly what you're doing. I'm really glad that we had pre-drilled and pre-cut all of these plastic holding pieces. It's made the job so much easier. And you can see in the corner there is just a very slight gap between the two bits of plastic, and in that we've got that crease of material. So the next thing I'm going to do is we'll neaten up that corner and we will tidy up all the excess material. Quick look from the outside before we do the final tensioning, and I'm happy with that. I've also released the tension on that strop that I had to keep the tent straight, because now that we've pinned down the sides are acting like guy ropes and it's actually staying straight by itself, which is exactly what I wanted. I've now trimmed the canvas back all around to a nice even depth, which is just sufficient to cover the white strip. And then I've sprayed it all using a bit of wood as a bit of protection on the back to get a good coverage of adhesive on the canvas and on that white strip. And now I'm going to carefully roll it over and then push the edge, tuck the edge in to get a nice neat finish. Just gently push it over, work our way along. Last thing then, once we've got good adhesion on the strip, I'm just going to use a trim tool just to run along the back edge and push the back bit down and neaten the whole thing up, and it looks like a really great factory finish. We'll just keep going all around. It's the next morning, we're back in the van. It was starting to get a bit dark last night, but I just wanted to show you by the light of day how we've sealed and neatened that edge right around the pop top, and I'm really happy with the finish. It also hides that white bead and it just gives us a really neat factory looking edge and factory looking finish. And I know that we've cut the fiberglass trim pieces that we're going to fit in here next so that they will butt up against that now black but previously white plastic strip and give us a very, very neat edge. We've also done the same at the back, and you can see the difference of having shaped the plastic. We get a better fit around the roof, but there's still light coming through at the edges inevitably, and of course we're going to address that when we apply some silicone around the edge of the pop top outside. I've also just temporarily pushed in the carpeted trim piece at the front just to see what that looks like, and we can see also the remaining roof on the top here, and I'll probably finish that off with a bit of matching carpet as well. The next job was to carpet the roof inside the tent before fitting the trim pieces, which I had now also covered in carpet. I'm now trial fitting the carpeted edge pieces, and they're doing exactly what I hoped they would do, which is to butt right up in to that white plastic extrusion, and that is going to make for a very neat finished job. I'm now doing the final fit of the various different trim pieces, having carpeted the roof. And my earlier work making sure that everything fitted nicely is really paying off. And again, the use of riv nuts has made life so much easier. So just take your time, guys, do the preparation. There's an old saying, you know, that things will not be all right in the night. Things are only as good as the last rehearsal. And in this kind of context, the last rehearsal is that fit of all the pieces before you do the final carpeting. So I'm happy with the way that's looking now. So that's me finished the interior trim bar one panel. You can see those pieces that I made up at the back, and I think it makes for a very neat job. The last panel that I need to put on is the panel that goes under the bottom here, where my speakers will be mounted and my rear lights that will be above the bed will be mounted, and that's that panel there waiting to go on.
So now I'm just finishing the job by sealing the canvas to the roof with my trusty electric silicone gun, putting a bead right around the edge, making sure that we get it right into the corner, right into the seam between the canvas and the metal, and then I'll go around it with a silicone edging tool just to push that in, squeeze it in, make sure we've got a good seal, and make sure that it looks neat and tidy. The other thing I did before I applied the silicone was to give a good clean around the edge and let it dry thoroughly, and then I used some white spirit just to clean off the metal, just to make sure we get some good adhesion. It's one of these jobs, you've just got to be prepared for it, get ready, get yourself set up, and then go for it.
In my experience, any masticing job just requires a bit of confidence. And the great thing with the electric mastic gun is you don't have to worry about continually squeezing the trigger for a constant flow. And that means all you have to worry about is controlling the nozzle and the bead of mastic.
Pop top's now sitting really nicely all around, but I'm going to finish it off at the front with a rubber spoiler.
The spoiler is self-adhesive, it comes with 3M tape and it just gets stuck in location, and as you can see it neatens up the front edge and provides a more aerodynamic shape at the front end. Job done.
So there you go, that is pop top installation. Quite an involved video, quite a lengthy one. Hopefully you found it useful. If you have, please like and please follow the channel. As the van build has nearly come to a completion now, we're looking forward to actually taking forward some great adventures in it. So please guys, like, follow the channel, stay safe out there whatever you're doing, and I'll see you soon.